Hello and welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. The entrepreneurial and angel investment community across the country has been anxiously awaiting the effective date of a provision in the Jobs Act, Title II, signed by President Obama in 2012. As I said, that provision to take effect because it changes the way early stage companies go out looking for money. It permits them to do something they've been prohibited from doing since 1933, and that is to advertise their ventures seeking funding from individuals or venture capital firms or institutional money across the country. It liberalizes, it breaks open the opportunity for early stage companies to find funding. As I said, both the investment community as well as the entrepreneurial community is anxiously awaiting to see what the regulations are and the extent to which it really frees them up to find desperate money to take dreams and turn them into commercial enterprises and hopefully success. We're going to be talking about that today with an expert in the field. My guest today is David Drake, who comes to us from Midtown Manhattan. David, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I appreciate your being here.
Well, thank you for having me.
I've read your materials and you're all over the place, so I don't know where to start. But why don't we start where we usually do? What is your background? Where are you from originally? How did you get into this business? What is it you do? You can answer any one of those,
all right.
And not necessarily in that order.
Well, let's go back. I was born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden.
Oh.
And I came over to study here about 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I fell into crowdfunding and Jobs Act by chance. About 2 years ago, my advisory firm, Untitled Capital, we invested in a startup called the Soho Loft to do events. It was an event-driven media company.
Okay.
And what we wanted to accomplish was, I wanted to bring my family office and accredited investors to events, to put them in one room so I could interact with them. We dealt with institutional investors, broker-dealers, high net worth individuals, venture capitalists. And that point of time, summer of 2011, was also an election year in Congress. So we were having speakers every other week coming up from D.C., and there were sub-congressional witnesses for the 6 underlying bills that were in the Jobs Act, Business Startup Act. And before it became the Jobs Act, we were discussing all the different bills separately. And we were the only one in the world doing events on crowdfunding every month in 2011.
Is that right?
Because nobody has really paid much attention to
Yes.
it. And the bill was still being discussed.
Yes.
It hadn't been passed.
It was an aspiration, not much more than that at the time.
Correct. So we're having the main events, and everybody's coming to the events. We're focusing on investors, and we're talking about Reg A, on-ramp, IPO. These are the underlying bills in the Jobs Act that has passed. Reg A hasn't passed yet. The one we're talking about today, which is Title II in the Jobs Act, allowing advertising for the first time in history. And the SEC equivalent in other countries, they don't permit private offerings to be advertised because private companies have not fulfilled what public companies have fulfilled in reporting requirements and licensing. So this new bill is allowing entrepreneurs to, for the first time in history, to advertise their private offerings to accredited investors in the U.S.
Define what advertise means in the context of the bill, the legislation. As I mentioned to you, I have an event called the Entrepreneurs Network. We tee up 5 early stage companies at every event. We have angel investors who are in the audience. Obviously, the presentations are intended to attract funding. Is that considered advertising?
Yes, I've been at events with angels are involved, and they will not let you in unless you have signed a accredited form, and they even keep the entrepreneurs outside of the room while another one is pitching.
But I present the Entrepreneurs Network as a networking venue where we happen to present 5 early stage companies, and we simply give them a stage, a platform for them to present. They stay on this side of the line, at least as I understand it, and that they don't get into valuation, they don't get into the cap table, they don't get into any of the details that you would normally find in a PPM, a private placement memorandum.
So with the new law, you'll be able to start talking about, I'm making an offering.
And since I'm not currently a broker-dealer, nor do I intend to ever become one because I'm too stupid to pass the test, and I'm not really inclined to do it anyway, will that free me up?
Yes,
to take a piece of any one of the ventures that present using my venue?
Yes. If you're asking me, you're taking a piece because you're letting them do it on your
Yes.
venue, yes, but you can do that regardless. And also, they can only take money from accredited investors.
Yes.
And the challenge right now is where the Angel Capital Association have been, I'm a member of that, and
Yes.
I'm also sitting on I'm advising 2 angel networks, and I'm on a board for one. The issue is, how do you verify that they're accredited?
Yes.
Because the law says you have to get you got to get a third-party verification, or you have to get an accountant or lawyer verifying that or show your taxes. Of course, the angels can say, "Are you kidding me? We're not going to show our taxes." When they had to, we're not going to start. But so there are gray areas, and the most confusing part is there are 2 amendments that were submitted at the same time as the law was coming into effect. Monday, September 23rd, the law comes into effect.
Yes.
It's been in the Federal Register for 60 days,
Right.
and that day, on Monday, it's legal to advertise under that form. But there are compliances that you have to be aware of, and entrepreneurs are not going to know all those compliances. So maybe some platforms out there, like a crowdfunding platform, who have the compliance in place might be the right way to go, because then you don't have to worry about what you don't know. They're compliant. For instance, one that I've been working with is called Seed Invest.
Seed Invest.
They are going to be compliant with SEC, including the amendments that might come in later. So they would say, hey, we're not a broker-dealer, but we'll let you
Yes.
do it SEC compliant.
There's a relatively new one called Rock the Post
Yes.
in Manhattan.
They've spoken at my events in the past.
They have. I've forgotten the name of the CEO, the founder.
He's from Spain.
Yes. Julio something or other. A very nice chap. I've talked with him on the phone. Are they now in compliance, or are they going to be on the leading edge of crowdfunding because they have the platform, they claim, a community of accredited angel investors around the country? They're already, as I understand it, they will consult with early stage companies, help them prepare to present, and then present them to their community of angels. Isn't that a form of crowdfunding?
Well, you know what? Maybe we should do the definition of crowdfunding.
Great idea.
Because there's over 2,000 crowdfunding platforms probably today.
Oh, really?
I know, Crowd Valley, for instance, they have 462. And they're considered being one, but they have 462 using their platform for their own crowdfunding.
Is crowdfunding all internet, or does it include physical?
My
mediums as well?
definition of crowdfunding is anytime you make a payment online
Yes.
with more than 2 people towards one purpose or project or service. That's what I consider crowdfunding in my book, just breaking it down. But it's interesting, in Europe, crowdfunding does not include debt, peer-to-peer lending. When they say crowdfunding, they exclude that. Well, we say crowdfunding, we include it. We'll go back to definition. Crowdsourcing is when you source people
Yes.
through the internet quickly
Right.
towards a common purpose. One is labor. You can actually go online and source people to help you at work. One is creativity, another is innovation. They're now adding something, revenue sharing, and then you have crowdfunding. As the 5th one, crowdfunding is in essence a project, a service, a product, an experience, like music. This all started with the entertainment industry.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Marillion was a band in the UK in 1997, used a computer from their computer to reach their fans to get $60,000 towards doing a tour. That was like the first recorded crowdfunding through the computer that we have recognized. And that's how we've been looking at crowdfunding.
Isn't that how Obama raised a big chunk of his $1 billion?
Well,
Through crowdfunding?
You could,
Yeah.
well, technically it is. You had the app. They did a really
Yes.
cool app, and people said, see what I did? I gave money to Obama.
Right.
I thought that was brilliant.
It was. Something the Republicans had better learn quickly.
And I've been telling crowdfunders for 2 years, people want instant recognition. The leaders now get it. The biggest ones are on rewards. We have to define it, because
Yes.
in crowdfunding, there are 4 different categories. You have debt, which is peer-to-peer lending, microfinancing; equity, which is not legal yet in the U.S., but that's where your question came from.
Right.
Well, they're doing this. It's very gray, and I'll go get to it. Then you have rewards, like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Rocket Hub. These are 3 of the biggest ones in the world. And then you have donations. One company I like to work with is called Give Together. They're doing really well. But donations we've had for decades. You give money on Red Cross online. That's considered crowdfunding. And if we're going to talk a little bit about numbers, a report last year and the year before showed that, it's been doubling. If you take these 4 categories, half of all the money spent is in donations every year. And was about 1.5 billion in 2011, 2.7 last year.
Donations, though, to 501c3s or
Correct.
501(4)s.
Correct.
Right.
To charities. Half of the 1.5 billion, 750 million was just donation-based. Last year, 2.7. This year, they think it's going to be 5.1. I say it's going to be closer to 6. The reason being is I've been working very closely with a company called Lending Club. They hired Lawrence Summers, Treasurer of State, on their board. They just put on the board a year ago John Mack from Morgan Stanley. So they got really big wigs. And about last December, they started exploding. They're going to hit $2 billion in peer-to-peer loans this year. In essence, you can go online as an entrepreneur today, go to the Lending Club, and you can lend up to $35,000 in loans from other peers for your project or for a purpose. But you have to have pretty good...
Speak to that for a moment, because my impression has been that if you're going to rely on crowdfunding, and if you're looking for $3 million, it's not likely you're going to get anything close to $3 million. The numbers I've been hearing are 25,000, 50,000, certainly short of 100,000.
Correct.
Every once in a while you hear about a big hit, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, but they are far and few between. When the floodgates open as a result of this legislation, do you see those numbers going up? So if I'm looking for $500,000, I can rely on crowdfunding to, over time, bring me in $500,000? Or will I still have to rely on the more traditional, conventional angel funding, angel groups, syndicates, and so on? Am I making myself clear?
Yes, the aspiration is, yes, that you should be able to rely. But yet again, I write for Forbes and Thomson Reuters and 30 other magazines on a regular basis. And I did a lot of traveling, while you're asking what I'm traveled, to interview governments, agencies, venture capitalists all over the world to be able to write more. I think, the equity portion of it is still complicated, extremely complicated. We talked to the SEC. For entrepreneurs listening to this, the equity portion, which go back to your original question, it's gray. We gave you the definition of crowdfunding. Everybody's using it now. Even hedge fund managers are coming and saying, hey, I'm going to crowdfund a family office to invest in hedge funds. So, there are broker-dealers using crowdfunding, like Circle Up. Hey, we're using crowdfunding, but it's in the spirit of crowdfunding. And for me, crowdfunding is really anybody can invest. The way people operate now is they have to have a accredited investor operating. Is it crowdfunding? Is it a venture capital fund? But back to your question, entrepreneurs should be trying to have crowdfunding as a strategy, not once for all the money you want. But you know what? They should use it as they use Facebook. It's a marketing tool. If they do it all or nothing, unless they're putting 100% of their time into it, they're still statistics still shows that 56% will fail.
I have an equity position with a company, and it's in the space that I have particular interest in, the 50-plus space, the boomer. And they were just, I won't mention the name, but they were just under contract with a crowdfunding company who advised them, helped them put together their presentation, put it out. And what my colleagues have ended up with is a list of 25 people who have identified themselves as suspects, at least, have a suspected interest in this particular venture. It's now the responsibility of my friend to get on the phone and otherwise contact each one of those 25 and give each one of them a pitch and an invitation to come in and get more information. Is that the way it works generally? Is the result of crowdfunding simply to provide me with a list of suspects, qualified to some extent, that is investors, prospective investors?
Well,
or are there services that follow through, make the connection, and try to help close the deal?
Those are broker-dealers.
Yeah.
Who close the deals.
Right.
And crowdfunding, as what you're referring to, that's not commonplace. Now you're talking about equity.
That's
crowdfunding
correct.
for equity
That's
is not
correct.
legal because you have to make sure they're accredited. But there are exceptions.
These people claim they have the list of accredited angel investors.
It's very great.
And they may very well.
There are a couple of rules like Reg A that allows you to take money from non-accredited, but nobody's done that successfully for the last 4 years. And Godspell, a gentleman who made the Broadway show, he's going to be speaking one of our events in 2 months, in a month's time, at the Players Club in New York. He did the last one where he raised $5 million, but he wouldn't probably do it again.
I can give you the name of another producer if you're looking for speakers. He's trying to raise money for another original play.
No, we're just going to focus on people who actually raised money or have money.
Yeah, okay. Well, he's had some hits.
So he should certainly come and enjoy that show.
Okay.
It's complicated because everybody has a different angle.
Yes.
And for what you're going through, you should really consult with a lawyer.
I did.
I am not a lawyer, but yeah,
I did. What I was told was, as long as, one, I'm not taking a percentage, I have no vested interest in any of the presentations or any money that they receive. It is billed as a networking venue, principally, because we have service providers, we have other entrepreneurs, we have other people who are thinking about, so it's a mixed group.
Right.
And we have accredited angel investors there as well, who may take an interest, and if they do, the responsibility is theirs,
right,
to visit with the presenter and get the additional information.
Those events are very important for everybody here in the States. You know, and this is actually an age of angels today, because when venture capitalists, there were 2,700 before the crisis, only 400 were operating or still in the business after fall of 2008, and the banks closed down. Angels became the focus of the last few years, and it's exploding. Both, especially in New York, we've seen an explosion of angel activity and startups coming to the city, which was very interesting, more so than in Silicon Valley, which is still very hot.
Yeah. Okay. I want to go back to Soho Loft. And there was a phrase, and I guess in your website, an event-driven financial media company. Is that what Soho Loft is?
Correct.
I understand the words, but when you put them all together like that, what does that mean?
We're focused on supporting about 300 events a year all over the globe, focused on entrepreneurs and financial. Some of them we produce, some of them we're speakers, some of them we are sponsors. It depends on which partnership we have. 50 of those are with angel networks, and a lot of angel and VCs attending them, 30 to 40. Obviously, the one in New York is the most popular one. You asked me earlier, is it expensive? Those are usually just $90. So no, it's not about paying $500, $1,000.
It's a few hours, or a half day, or a full
it's
day?
a half a day normally. So those are event-driven events, well, that we build around a support network and distribution network.
Right.
So we bring more investors into these events. We'll let entrepreneurs know about them. And the media part of it is actually me writing for 30, 40 financial magazines on a regular basis about angel networks, both in Europe and the US and down under, and that's why I've been traveling a lot.
Years ago, when I was a much younger man, there was an organization called the CEO Institute, based in New York, and the firm I was with was charged $65,000 to be a primary sponsor for a weekend, with therefore the opportunity to meet and greet and have lunch with the CEOs of companies all over the country who came in for nothing and were put up at a resort for the entire weekend. Sponsors paid dearly for the opportunity to meet with the CEOs. And we brought in, or they brought in, people from the government, from other governments and so on, to talk about the economy, to talk about whatever the environmental issues were. Is that the model we're talking about?
No, that's what we call today business intelligence events.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's a different word for it. It's called business intelligence,
put a new
where you
label
go you go to a CEO and you say, we're going to have you meet who you want to meet.
Yes.
And you pay for it dearly. We're not involved in that business. We're well aware of it, and it's a very
CEO
lucrative
Institute,
business.
by the way, failed.
No.
Yes. But after we gave them our $65,000. You're not doing that.
No, we're not doing that. That's a business intelligence industry. It's a segment of crowdfund events. And there are thousands and thousands of events. Interestingly enough, there are, it's hard to track them. There's so many of them.
David, you're a young man. What makes you so smart? You haven't been on the planet long enough to have the answers to most of the questions most people have about how to invest, should I invest, and of course how to beat the odds, because as you know, the mortality rate of most early stage companies,
Yes.
slim to none that you're
Yes.
going to make it, even under the best of circumstances. And as you know, even if you get the first and second round, if you don't get the third round, the game's over.
Yeah. Well, I think
know that because I've lived it.
one of the reasons is I have an insatiable desire to know and learn. And that's why I write 5 pieces a week about things I don't know. If I don't know about something, I want to write about it. So I write about it and I learn about it. I just love learning across the board, and having been involved with sovereign wealth funds from ADIA in the Middle East, which is the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, to institutional investors, family offices, private equity, and hedge funds, and venture capital, angel networks, and advising all of them, I get to learn tremendous amount of information. But for entrepreneurs, and looking at companies just like yourself, it's the flexibility of the team members that I think are the most important. Will the team member know that they might not be qualified to be CEO at the one point? Will they don't have an ego? Will they also realize that coming to your event, they might realize, wait a minute, maybe my company's not worth $10 million on a napkin, because I'm getting really tough questions here, and I realized I am not ready. So a lot of people come to your event and my event, and they start realizing, oh, well, maybe I'm in the clouds and I need to come down a little bit.
David, that is exactly the invitation extended to the people who come. I refer to what we do as kind of an upscale flea market for entrepreneurs. And the invitation is come, risk falling flat on your face, particularly if you're a first timer, and let us pick you up and get you ready for prime time. That's exactly what we try to do. I don't pretend that it's anything more than that. But there's a need for it, to help them get ready for prime time.
And even more now, with everything so digitalized, people want that human interaction.
Yes.
A lot of people can only learn from human interaction, so the events will always stay.
Yeah, yep. What's your take on the entrepreneurial climate in this country now as compared with other countries? Not necessarily from a legislative standpoint or government-sponsored or supported, but just the spirit of entrepreneurship and the willingness to invest.
I was speaking at the World Entrepreneurship Forum, and I'm also one of the authors of their book that's coming out next week or so, about a year ago. And they're all focused on academics, or they're focused on the educational programs from 63 countries. And it was all about ecosystems at that time. And the U.S. has always been a lead on that part. I would say, Holland, the UK certainly has a very aggressive entrepreneurial program, and I'll tell you why. You can actually deduct your salary income against an investment you made if it's qualified in the UK. And that's why they get so much traction, because you're not allowed to do that here. You can't take your salary and say, I'm going to write off 50% because I put it into a startup. So there are very interesting scenarios going on. I was just down under in Australia, New Zealand, and I would say right now UK, Scandinavia, Sweden specifically, maybe Holland a little bit, are very aggressive. Singapore wants to be leader in entrepreneurship. They have scholarships in Singapore. I've seen that you're bringing $10,000 and the government agencies will match it with 60. So Singapore wants to become the center for it. And there's a movement globally for the last couple of years towards entrepreneurship, because we all realize that jobs are created by small businesses. And if entrepreneurs can get capital formation easier, we can grow up jobs.
You mentioned the Middle East before. What's going on in the Middle East, in spite of the fact that it's burning around the edges?
Well, we've dealt with institutional money and family office money, if we're going to talk about that. Entrepreneurship, it's being spurred. Qatar has a small, medium-sized fund, as well as Dubai and Abu Dhabi.
Excuse me.
Because of the political turmoil there the last couple of years, the first thing that happened was all the money and focus went to Dubai, because they have their own court in Dubai, financial center, a British court system. So that one, more focus went there, and secondly, more people.
Then the bottom fell out of the economy.
And then secondly, people started putting money to the UK or the Western Europe or the US, and that's what we've seen. So the political turmoil over there is pushing more and more money west, because they want to have capital preservation, they want to have capital security. Well, for entrepreneurs, yes, there's a push over there, but it's still very, very far. They don't have an angel network infrastructure.
I know there are a number of large, wealthy families who have the equivalent of a family office. You didn't mention Israel and what's going on in Israel. My God, there's so much new technology coming out of Israel.
You're right.
In almost every sector,
it's a high-speed
particularly
bridge.
healthcare.
The companies coming from Israel left and right. And they're just popping up with companies. I'm very impressed with Israel.
Why?
Because I'm just seeing Israeli companies coming to the U.S. to raise more and more money on a regular basis. One company that we were working with called Give Together, they had the highest conversion rate for crowdfunding on donation I've ever seen. And they did something I really admired when I started working with them. You know, they had a professor, well, they had a PhD candidate from Harvard and NYU on there in economics. I'm like, why do you have economics professors or PhD candidates? Well, because we're using game theory to make it fun for people to use the technology. So yes, and I'm seeing a lot of leading lawyers in New York representing a lot of different companies from Israel today.
I do another show called the Entrepreneurs Network Radio, and recently we had two experts on, expert in crowdfunding. And the question I asked them, the question I ask you now is, can you describe generally the profile of an early stage company and its suitability for crowdfunding? What are the criteria you look for to determine whether or not someone who comes to you with an interest in crowdfunding is in fact suited for crowdfunding? Either in terms of where they are in the maturation cycle of development, or the principles involved, or the readiness of their venture, whether it's a product or a service. And maybe I just listed all the criteria. Well, what are they?
Well, look, we need to delineate when we say crowdfunding here. When you talk about equity in your first scenario, it's very different than doing a reward based on Kickstarter. There hasn't been anybody who's been able to duplicate either one of them successfully. It is also new. That success on the reward hasn't been proven yet, and we're being consulted. You know, we've been working with Washington Ballet in DC to help them on that, and we've been working with other groups to do consulting on how to do crowdfunding for reward. On the equity side, the proof is in the pudding. There's only a couple of firms that have done it really well, but yet again, they haven't broken, you know, more than 2-3% of the whole crowdfunding amount of money in the world. If the crowdfunding is going to hit $6 billion this year, the equity part of it that you're referring to is going to be around 4 or 5% only.
You know, you just touched on something, because now the way it works, if I'm an early stage company, let's say in the Philadelphia market, and because Philadelphia tends to be somewhat parochial, and so and probably won't go beyond a radius of 100 to 150 miles, because I want to go see it, kick it, feel it, and so on. Anyway, with crowdfunding, I then put it out to the world, right? Just by virtue of the fact that it's internet, which is quite different from the way people look for money now and the way people invest.
Right.
A dimension of it I hadn't thought about before.
Well, that's the thing. In '33, after the Great Depression, we didn't have the internet or the TV. It was, you know, we don't have these communication tools. The argument with the Congress was, well, we've been doing this all the time, kind of breaking the law by emailing people. So now the law is catching up with it. So crowdfunding is Title III of the Jobs Act. It's separate from Title II. Title II, you can advertise, but you can't take money if you're not accredited. Accredited means that you have at least $200,000 in salary the last 2 years, or $300,000 if you're married, or $1 million net worth excluding your home. And you're expected to have the next year as well. That's the accreditation issue.
And those rules haven't changed for a long time.
Right, for 80 years, like you said. So September 23rd, you'll be able to advertise, but you can only take money from somebody who's accredited.
That won't change. You still have to be an accredited angel investor.
The crowdfunding for equity that you're referring to, it's great because you're talking to groups today that are doing it, but they're only dealing with accredited investors. And the law that hasn't been passed, it might not pass for another year, maybe 6 months to 12 months before it becomes legal. I said summer 2014, already a year ago, and I'm probably going to hit it right on the nail. That part of it will allow you to advertise to non-accredited and take money. But that one is convoluted because you can only take 10% up if your salary's up to 100,000.
I'm getting a headache.
So when you asked me in the beginning, it's gray. And I've been deconstructing every scenario there is in the world, in different countries, from funds down to crowdfunding. And I'm just, you know, I'm saying I understand what you're doing. And it's been fascinating.
What will you be doing 3 years from now? And you have less than a minute to tell me.
I am trying to live for the moment. I love what I'm doing. I'll probably be more settled in New York and travel a lot less, for certain. And I'll be working with passionate entrepreneurs and people looking for funding and helping them guide them through what is possible and what's available out there. Because there's so many funding options out there, and the reason entrepreneurs don't use it is because it's so difficult for them to deal with one more thing that they
Yes.
don't know.
Yes.
I see this blank stare like, are you kidding me? I'm paying rent, I'm running a shop, I got people to pay, I got this and this and this, and you want me to go and hire a social media manager who's going to have it in my Facebook? I don't even know where to find them.
Right.
You're going to probably rip me off, and I got to worry about other things.
And raising money is a full-time job.
Yeah. So on the crowdfunding side for rewards, I would encourage everybody to just try it and make it a strategy you do every 2 months and not one for all.
So if anyone is interested in learning more about who you are, what you do, and how you do it, they can go to your website at www.
The Soho Loft.
It should be up on the screen sooner or later.
The Soho Loft.
The Soho Loft.
The best way would be for people just to join my newsletter.
Your newsletter.
Newsletter on the soholoft.com, which allows them to read about what early stage capital resources are out there. Angel investors, loans, government grants, crowdfunding, and that'll probably be the best.
Well, it's a fascinating subject. It's still, as you said, a gray area, and while it's a gray area, it gives you and others an opportunity to help sort it out and clarify it. Thank you very much for being here. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, this is the Entrepreneurs Network. I am Rick Anthony. Take very good care of yourselves.